Hi, I'm John Mayfield, the real estate tech guy with another Global Real Estate School podcast. Welcome to the broadcast. My name's John Mayfield, the real estate tech guy for Global Real Estate School, and we are continuing our support from USA Mortgage, the good folks there. They've been so good to provide a lot of good content for our podcast and YouTube videos. I do want to mention their license number, NMLS 227262. They're equal housing lender. They're just great folks, and I'm really excited that we have Christian Demand on the call with us here. And he actually does a lot of work in an interesting side for USA Mortgage, which is what you call pay it forward. Tell us about that, Christian. First of all, thanks for joining us. So I should have said thanks for that.
Yes, thanks for having me. Definitely looking forward to the conversation here.
Great. So tell us a little bit. I think this is interesting because on some of the podcasts, I briefly talked about my passion for helping veterans with the home buying process, but you guys actually take it up a notch and do some additional help. So I'd love for you to tell our audience a little bit about USA Mortgage and how you help veterans in a whole different capacity.
Yeah. So here at USA Mortgage, obviously, we VA loans were kind of some of the initial grounds that the company started on, hence kind of where a little bit of where the name came from. But the pay it forward program, is something that we started a couple of years ago. And essentially, it was started with a business partner of my owner here that is former military himself, and just kind of noticed that there's 20 to 25% of the military get relocated between the branches in the U.S. every year. And with the VA loan, especially with them able to do 100% financing, it's instead of renting, a lot of them are buying homes. So he found an area where assistance could be provided. And so we work with a lot of different channels. Along with myself as a loan officer, we also have relationship managers that work with the ambassadors or the realtors in each area. So they kind of have constant communication of market updates, and then they pass along customers that are ready to purchase homes to us, really just to kind of be in a big flow to take the moving process off of the veteran's mind, as they have, sometimes as little as a few weeks to move from, like I just had a customer that's moving from Washington to Maryland, and I actually just helped a different family move from Hawaii all the way over to Virginia. So a lot of miles moved. Any way that we can help them is huge for us.
Very, very interesting. Now, a lot of times, Christian, there are veterans who think, because I've heard this a lot throughout my career, they think, well, I already used my VA loan. I can't use it. I can't get another one. And they kind of have this mentality that it's a one-time opportunity, but you can actually have more than one VA loan. Or kind of walk us through some of how that works, so that anyone watching or listening who's in military could understand that it's not a one-time, and especially for our real estate students that are going to be working with potential military consumers.
Yeah, so that's definitely something common that we see with a lot of people, as far as if they can use it, how they can use it. And the biggest thing with using multiple VA loans is, as long as you're moving into your primary residence, the VA loan is still eligible. So like there are customers that in different markets other than the one that we're in now, where everything is selling relatively quickly, sometimes they have a problem selling their home before they have to move and buy a new one. So sometimes they'll end up buying a new home, and then with the thought of selling that later. So as long as you're moving into the into your new primary residence, it is also based off of your certificate of eligibility. Really the biggest difference between someone using it for the first time and the second time is the VA funding fee, just because it's a different percentage, but the funding fee ends up getting financed anyway. So, in a couple $100,000 loan for the house you're buying, the few $1,000 difference doesn't make a huge difference in the monthly payment. So it's pretty negligible as far as if it's your first time or second or third or however many times you're taking advantage of it there as you move.
Okay. So just to clarify then, if I'm a veteran and I am relocating and my certificate of eligibility allows me, based on my current loan and what I want to purchase at the new place, if I'm going to be living in that home, could I get a second VA loan as a veteran? If I'm going to live in that home, will VA allow me to rent my old home out, or will I need to sell it, or should I sell it first before I get the new VA loan?
So you can work from both angles there. So like I mentioned, so your certificate of eligibility shows all of your previous VA loans. It's basically the VA's way to keep track of how many times you've used their loan. And like I said, so it helps keep a track of when you've used it, how you used it, and then how everything has gone with that loan, such as making payments on it and being everything current there. But yes, so we do have customers that, especially a lot of people that live that are moving away from hotbed areas like California or Florida or Texas, where it is, where renting it is a real option depending on how long they've been there. That is something that you can do because, again, the new loan is based on your new circumstance. So as long as, you can't buy an investment home with a VA loan, but if you have a home that you're moving away from with the VA loan, as long as everything is current on the payment side, you have no issue keeping that and using your VA loan privileges again.
Okay, great. Excellent. Now, walk us through the steps for a veteran, or if I'm an agent, I have a couple who is a military and they want to use or I talk to them about getting a VA loan. First step would be the certificate of eligibility, correct? Is that something you can do online now? Or, I mean, just walk us through that process and maybe explain to the group what a certificate of eligibility, what that all encompasses.
So it is something that you can access as a consumer through the VA website. You are able to obviously access your own certificate of eligibility based on, I believe it's your name, date of birth, and social security number are what you need to access that. But normally for our customers, we actually end up pulling that for them here from our processing side. So anyone that's looking to take advantage of a VA loan, the initial steps aren't any different than if you were if you weren't a veteran looking to purchase a home with a conventional loan or an FHA loan, such as just reaching out to see your pricing options. As far as the qualifications and everything, that's where, sometimes I get a question of what if I'm the relation to a veteran, or kind of how that works. Sometimes you still have privileges and still don't. So that's where you may need to look into the certificate of eligibility side. Like, for example, if you're unfortunately a widow of someone that was active duty, you still have some access to the VA eligibility. But like if your parent per se was a veteran and you were not, you don't have access to a VA loan. So that's where you could look into the certificate of eligibility, but your local loan officer is going to know that when you reach out to them.
That's a great point, though, because there are a lot of women who, as you mentioned, unfortunately, their spouse died, and it could depend if they were on active or so forth, but there are still opportunities for them to take advantage of VA financing, which helps. So keep that in mind. And, that's why, and on many of our calls with the USA mortgage loan officers, your best first place to go is to go to Christian or one of the loan officers at USA Mortgage, because they can look at the scenario. It's kind of like to use the analogy, the similarity of a doctor can't really prescribe the best method of treatment until he has all of the information in front of him, and you kind of are the same way. You might have all the information and say, you know what, you qualify for a VA loan, but I think you might be better off to go over this route, maybe an FHA or a USDA because of interest rates or whatever. So kind of interesting. Wanted to also help our listeners understand So after you get the certificate of eligibility and you're going to do the paperwork and get them pre-approved, and they find a home they like, and so you've done all of the verifications you need, have pre-approved them, so now we just have to find a home which has to be appraised. It's a little different with the VA side because they actually call it a certificate of reasonable value. Talk to the group about how that all comes about. And
So the reason they have a different appraisal is based on the investment firm. That's one of the benefits of a VA loan is that it's a government-backed loan through the VA. So part of that is they have certain requirements that the appraisal for an FHA or conventional loan doesn't have. Now I get a lot of questions about that of like, is it more strict? Is it less strict? I don't really view it as more or less strict than the other appraisal. It's just a little different. And what I mean by that, it kind of depends on the area. Like for some customers that I work with in Maryland, I know kind of how those appraisals go, and they differ than VA appraisals in Texas and Florida, just as your normal regular appraisal would for a conventional or an FHA loan. So like, again, it has a different name, really just because they appraise the home a little bit differently, but it's not like it's not necessarily more strict or less strict than an appraisal. It's just a different thing. The biggest piece is the VA looks a lot more into the foundation, such as like a termite inspection and some other things like that are required. Whereas on a conventional loan, some of those inspections aren't as required. That's where things can
right.
be a little bit more strict, but that's an inspection, not necessarily the appraisal.
Is VA a little more lenient on credit scores or, some of those features versus other types of loans, or will you need to kind of still have a pretty good credit score? And
So from a credit perspective, the most lenient is going to be an FHA route, just because, you can go all the way down to 580 with an FHA loan. Usually you have to put a little bit more than the 3.5% down to kind of meet the guidelines there with a little bit worse credit.
right.
But for a VA loan, it's a 620 as far as the minimum of what you'll need to qualify. But the good news is that with VA loans and the credit scores, the interest rates don't vary as much as a conventional loan would. So like, for example, if you have, a 740 credit score versus a 660, a conventional interest rate is probably going to be a decent change there. Whereas a VA loan is much more lenient from a rate perspective, again, because of the investor, because it's for veterans, as part of, I view it as part of a reward for what they do for our country, to where things, they have that benefit
Right.
there.
Which is a great. I totally agree. I guess my last question would be, sometimes real estate agents get all in a panic and like, oh gosh, they're going VA. And so it has this stigma that we're going to have problems. It's going to take
Mm-hmm.
forever. What are you seeing typical VA loans closing? I mean, I think sometimes it gets more of a bad rap than it should but I'm just curious. I mean, for closing times and in today's market, appraisals and title work is backed up because, as you said, the market's crazy. But are
Mm-hmm.
you seeing, I guess, would you allow a little bit more time over a conventional loan, or if everything runs smoothly, can it be just as quick as a normal loan?
So we're very fortunate at USA Mortgage that luckily we don't have to worry about those things. I'm actually lucky enough to where my processors and underwriters sit right here down the hall from me. So our turn times for most of our loans are still anywhere from 25 to 30 days, if not even shorter, if it needs to be.
That's
The biggest
great.
thing with a VA loan specifically is the certificate of reasonable value. Sometimes because it has to go through a couple more verifications after the appraisal is completed, sometimes that can take a little bit longer to come back. Usually it's 7 to 10 business days. So, you don't see a ton of, 2 or 3 week closings with a VA loan. But again,
Right.
it's very rare that we have a closing go longer than 30 days unless it's scheduled that way. Obviously sometimes you have closing dates that are 35, 40 days out when you get the contract. And even those are cleared to close with, a week or so to go. So things are very efficient here, whereas at different companies and different positions, it hasn't been that lucky for me.
Good. And I guess that's another reason agents need to encourage their buyers when they have that first meeting and you enter into a buyer's agency agreement, have your buyer get pre-approved ahead of time with David or others and Christian as part. Sorry, I was also talking to David today, but with Christian, and David's with USA Mortgage, but with Christian and talk to Christian, because that way he can begin that process of getting a lot of that upfront work out of the way, so that when your buyer finds a home, you're just really down to getting the appraisal and the title work and those inspections and the last few items. So very good. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'd just like to go back to something you said previously about kind of the viewpoint on VA loans. And that's something that we definitely get a lot of, more so from listing agents than necessarily buyer's agents, especially in a time like now where you're in a multiple offer situation. Usually, you're dealing with cash buyers, FHA, all the different loan types that you see on pre-approvals. And that's where I talk to customers about the difference that we are coached here and how our loan officers are a little different. Every time I have a buyer that puts in an offer, as soon as I know that they've put an offer in, within 20 to 30 minutes, I've placed a phone call to the listing agent, identifying myself as their lender to reinforce that offer. Because like you said, it is kind of a stigma in the industry for FHA and VA loans of that there's some kind of issue, the borrower may not be as qualified. Again, these are just kind of common stigmas that usually aren't true. And so that, again, it's part of the extra mile that we're coached to go here, especially in our branch at USA Mortgage, to make sure that those offers are looked at with the correct priority and even top priority. Because, again, the story that I tell people, like I said, I have a customer moving in from Hawaii to Virginia. Like they have to come, they have to start work on a certain day, regardless of whether they own a home or not. So it's either they're in a house or they're living out of a hotel. And that's the story that I tell these agents and the buyers when I get a chance to talk to them.
Yeah, that's great advice. I love that. Very good. Well, we will have Christian's information down below. You can contact him. Here's a marketing tip for you. Anyone who's watching who's soon to be a real estate agent, or maybe you're already a real estate agent. I did a VA home buyers seminar, it was for veterans years ago, Christian. And I remember I had 7 couples show up for the seminar. It was at my office. All 7 couples bought a property, but they wanted to get a loan. So I thought, I'm going to try a VA home buyer seminar, and we advertised it on Facebook. I told Facebook, I only want my ad to show up for veterans who are retired or active in these zip codes. And I'd like for them to be renters. And so I had 2 people show up for that online webinar. I invited a loan officer that knew did some VA loans. He did the program, and both of those people bought a home. So I know Christian would be willing to help out if someone says, "Hey, I'd like to do something like that." Be creative. There are a lot of veterans who really need to get a home loan and they want to buy a home, and they've served our country. They have this entitlement, and USA Mortgage, which is cool how you all started off that principle. I think I'd heard that before, and so very, very good. But contact Christian. He'd be glad to help you. This has been very helpful for me. I was going to ask one last question. Those watching, my son might be getting ready to take their exam. What cost does the veteran have to pay? I think that's always a test question, and I can't remember. I wanted to make sure is there a fee veteran always has to pay? Is it the funding fee or the VA funding fee? I didn't know if that is correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
so every VA loan has a funding fee. That's part of it's part of what the VA kind of, it's almost like if you want to think of it as like a servicing charge almost, it goes directly to the VA. It's a percentage of your loan amount. But like I mentioned previously, it gets misconstrued as far as pay goes because it shows up as a closing cost on your forms and all that stuff, but it's actually a part of
Right.
your loan. So it's financed. So it's not anything that you have to pay out of pocket. And then also with the funding fee, if you are a disabled veteran in any capacity, you are exempt of the funding fee because of the disability.
Okay.
So
So which is
that's
good.
the kind of the only caveat there is that if you're a disabled veteran, again, that would be according to like the VA and your certificate of eligibility is where
Right.
that would be stated. Uh, you are exempt from the funding fee. So it's not a part of the situation at all.
Okay, good. And then many of the other closing costs, the seller is allowed to pay those. So you might find that if you have a buyer, because I remember a story I always tell of some buyers, and he was a former military. He had no idea how the VA process worked, and they had no down payment. They had great credit, but the seller paid all of their closing costs, and they were able to get in that home with I think they got money back, actually,
Mm-hmm.
a small credit. And so it was such a gratifying transaction for me. So, well, Christian, thank you so much. You've been amazing to provide some information on VA financing. Be sure and check out USA Mortgage. They have just some great loan programs. They're good people. I've mentioned this, I think, on every podcast, Christian, but back in '08 or '09, right when the market was kind of tanking a little bit, I was so impressed because we had a gentleman from USA Mortgage who came to a meeting I was at, and he had a passion to help people get back on the road to home ownership, and talked about some of the programs USA Mortgage had that was really designed to help people understand what was keeping them from getting qualified, and how you could get, kind of repair your credit, and what you could do to get back on the right track. And I just was so impressed that day because I thought, you don't see a lot of loan officers who want to help people who don't qualify for a loan. It's kind of like, just give me the people I can close the deal with
Mm-hmm.
and make money. But here your company was saying, we know you may not be able to buy for a few years or for a year or 6 months, but we still want to help you out. And I just thought that was really cool. So check out USA Mortgage. Thank you, Christian, for your help, and appreciate your time on our podcast and YouTube video today.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me, John. I greatly appreciate it.
All right, great. Well, thanks everybody for watching. As always, go out and make it a great day, and be sure and share the podcast and the YouTube video and tell others about it as well. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the podcast for Global Real Estate School. I'm John Mayfield, the Real Estate Tech Guy. Go out and make it a great day.
Topics discussed on this podcast are for informational purposes only and are not a commitment to lend. Additional terms and conditions apply. Interest rates and products are subject to change without notice and may or may not be available at time of commitment or lock-in. DAS Acquisition Company LLC is not affiliated with or endorsed by any government entity or agency, including the USDA, HUD, or VA. DAS Acquisition Company LLC, doing business as USA Mortgage, MLS number 227262, Equal Housing Opportunity.